Hello and welcome to another episode of Antiques, Art, and Valuables. My name is Bob Langer. Today we have a very interesting topic to discuss and learn about, and that's looted art. In the 8th century, Jewish communities under Charlemagne were overthrown by the Crusades. As a result, there was a large exodus to Muslim Spain in the 9th century. From the 9th century to the early 13th century, there were 400 years of Jewish poets, scholars, scientific innovators. They were teaching languages, medicine. They financed kings, earls, and princes. They were put in charge of the mint in Cordoba, and they entered the court of Duke Vladislav. In the cities of Castile and Aragon, they established an administrative infrastructure leading to border growth and development of commerce. As a result of their successes and gaining wealth, there was a buildup of envy, especially since the Muslims resented their loss of political power. The Muslims convinced Pope Innocent III to issue a decree outside of Muslim Spain where Jews in position of power were forbidden. In the interim, Jewish people under Charlemagne were suffering because they were accused of poisoning wells, and creating a Black Death resulted in a Jewish exodus to Poland and Germany in the 14th century. In the meanwhile, in Muslim Spain, Jews continued to serve Muslim and Christian leaders, and in the 18th century, non-Jewish aides and advisors who had no political support developed deep resentment and hatred toward the Spanish Jews, and as a consequence, they retaliated to recapture their loss of power to the Jewish groups. As a result of this, Jewish couriers were ousted from power within the courts, and all Jewish property was confiscated. Wealthy Jews in the interim leave for Germany and are allowed to leave because of their financing of the 7 Years' War, which was successful. Jews leaving for Germany resettled and conducted business in Berlin, Hanover, Munich, and Vienna, where they financed the buildings of castles and at the same time created additional wealth for themselves, and where they begin to accumulate art and antiques. There was tremendous German economic success by Jewish families, such as the Rothschilds, the Oppenheimers, and the Gompers. They promoted railroad construction and other industrial projects. Because of their tremendous success, they entered German politics in the early 19th century, joining other non-Jewish parties to promote civil rights, which led to laws abolishing restrictions on civil and political rights derived from religious differences. Later on, in the late 19th century, 9 Jewish scientists are awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. They expand their knowledge into medicine and law, and as a result of all of this, there was a new resentment of Jewish power and influence and the rise of anti-Semitism. Pamphlets begin to flood Germany denouncing the intellectual domination of Germany by Jews. They claim too many Jews in universities. They claim too many Jewish doctors. There are too many Jews in the labor force. They claim Jews are now a menace to German society. 30 years later, in 1920, the German Workers' Party advocates that no Jew can be a citizen of Germany. At the same time, there is the rise of Adolf Hitler, who states, "I am acting in accordance with God. Anti-Semites of the world, unite." Hitler became chancellor in January 1933, and the first concentration camp was established at Dachau 2 months later, at which time there is a boycott of Jewish doctors, Jewish lawyers, and Jewish shop owners. There are beatings, tortures, and thousands of Jews begin to flee Germany. In May 1933, there were book burnings of Jewish authors and non-Jewish sympathizers. On the night known as Kristallnacht, 200 synagogues are destroyed, 700 businesses are burned to the ground, and 200 Jews are murdered. 35,000 Jews are sent to concentration camps. New laws are enacted, and Jews are forbidden to operate retail shops. They are not permitted to engage in mail order trade. They are not permitted to offer goods or services or to advertise. In addition, all Jewish claims to pensions and any compensation is declared invalid. All Jewish property is confiscated. Hitler now sets up 3 offices. The first office is handled what Hitler described as degenerate and modern art, which is given over to Hermann Göring for handling. The second office, covering stolen art, including prints, books, and documents that were stolen from France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, is headed up by Alfred Rosenberg in Paris. Other Jewish art collections, except from very prominent Jewish families, are shared between Adolf Hitler and Hermann Göring. During the first 6 months of confiscation, Nazi documents show 21,903 paintings and objects of art were confiscated from Jewish homes and Jewish shop owners. As Jews flee Europe, art collections not already confiscated have to be sold for pennies on the dollar. These were known as forced sales. After the war, the United Nations found forced sales illegal and subject to negotiated settlements. In the interim, Adolf Hitler demands all art from Rothschild's collection for himself. Most of it was for his Führer Museum, which he intends to build in Austria after the war. Hermann Göring shares looted art from non-prominent Jews, museums, and art and objects of art confiscated from Catholic churches. Göring, in the meanwhile, sells most of the confiscated art for his own profit. He also developed a scheme to send 4 dealers to New York to sell the stolen art, the so-called degenerate and modern art. One dealer sets up shop at 3 West 46th Street, 1 block from the Jewelry Exchange, and much of the profit is returned back to Germany to support the German war effort. The shop is so successful that they moved to a larger space on West 57th Street with a thriving business in stolen art. At the end of the war, hundreds of thousands of looted art and objects of art, including art and relics from the Catholic Church, are found in hundreds of railroad cars and hidden away in caves. 3 million cubic feet of furniture and household objects stolen from the French are also found hidden away for Hitler's mobile Acton furniture product. With regard to degenerate and modern art, which Hitler finds repulsive, he plans to rid Germany of artists such as Chagall, Beckmann, Salvatore Dali, Pablo Picasso, Klee, Leger, Otto Dix, Van Gogh, and 45 others, which he claims are degenerate artists. At war's end, many objects of art were destroyed, lost, or stolen. A vast majority were alleged to be hidden in secret Russian depositories, and from the hundreds of thousands stolen or destroyed, many objects are returned to the countries from which they were taken. But the fate of many thousands today remain unknown, undecided, and still the cause of considerable controversy. Many remain tied up in legal battles. Vast quantities of antiques and art were willfully loaded or damaged by the Nazi forces, and still many objects of art from German territory were picked up by Soviet forces, shipped to Russia, where they disappeared into private collections, many to be discovered 50 years later by art historians. Many pieces of Jewish ceremonial art stolen from synagogues and private collections have disappeared. An accurate accounting of the ownership of stolen art was impossible to prove without records, receipts, and photographs. Few families fleeing for their lives would take time out to list their possessions left behind. The Hague Convention of 1907, however, provided compensation of stolen property during wartime with some proof of ownership. However, the Russians disregarded all conventions, claiming art, antiques, and objects of art were the spoils of war, and that they were legally justified in appropriating thousands of works as compensation for what they described as a tremendous loss of life and property as a result of being invaded by German armies. One particular item at the end of the award, taken by a U.S. soldier, Joe Mador, was a very important piece, a manuscript of the 9th century, as well as a jeweled encrusted cross, taken from the Quedlinburg Church and returned to the church only after his family was paid $3 million. The front cover was encrusted with semi-precious stones and gold. Art taken from prominent Jewish families, ancient art from a Berlin museum, prints, drawings, and documents from museums in Dresden and Bremen were taken by Soviet troops to Russia, some to have reappeared and known to be in private collections. Many works are in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg and the Ruskin Museum in Moscow, where they have been featured in recent exhibition. The ownership of this property has been hotly contested, with no results for those claiming rightful ownership. On another segment of Looted Art, we are going to follow the trail from Berlin to New York, to museum curators, and to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and to the Guggenheim, and then to the United States Supreme Court. We hope you have enjoyed this segment of Antiques, Art, and Valuables, and we look forward to visiting with you again on Channel 63.